Welcome to Scanners Offline, a Dropfleet podcast by Matt,
Will, and JJ.
The news. Things that have been happening recently in the Dropfleet world. There's not too much at the moment, just a few little bits that have come through. Like, we've been waiting on the fleet boxes for a long time.
Yeah.
And finally, we've seen some in person, because we went to Firestorm Games for Fleet Muster. And by the way, which is an amazing place. I want to live there.
We need one in Birmingham.
Yeah. Why don't we have one in Birmingham, such a big city?
Anyone out there that wants to invest in a cool project? Hint, hint.
We will run it. We just need investors. We'll open a big gaming store just like Firestorm.
Send us money.
The lemon stand just isn't cutting it. Or lemonade.
So it was really nice to see the Dropfleet shelves stocked. It was like Dropfleet Santa's come and made everything ready in the form of TT Combat. It looks like production's flowing again, which is news and good news. And we picked up those fleet boxes, stroked them. Oh, look at the lovely artwork.
It's really nice artwork in the flesh as well.
Yeah.
Tried to resist buying them. Successfully on my part.
So that's good news at the moment that we've got the fleet boxes available and that product seems to be flowing. So Dropfleeters, get out there, buy what you need. Even the battle cruisers, the elusive battle cruisers, seem to be available too. Apart from that, I mean, we had that little dangle of information about destroyers and monitors, but since those pictures, we've not heard anything.
It's gone quiet, I think.
Secrets. I think TT Combat's focusing on getting all of the remaining Kickstarter issues out of the way, and kind of tying up loose ends.
That's newsworthy in itself. That it's nice to see them rolling up that, as you've just said, tying up that loose end.
Yeah.
Which is a rather big loose end. I do feel for those people who've been that patient that long. But it's great that TT have addressed that as a direct thing, and seems to be paying off really fast. It's nice to see the posts of people on Facebook being like, I finally got my stuff, and being really happy about it. So. Did
you ever get your missing widgets? Passing interest.
No, I didn't.
You should have TT.
I never got any.
You're not the only one. Lots of people are missing widgets, so.
I do. I should tell them. I never got any widgets, so you guys lent me your spares. Lend me your ears. Lend me your spare widgets. I've reached that point now where I've got more cruisers to build. I've got no widgets. I've run out. I don't know what to do. I'm thinking about supergluing the clear plastic stand directly to the model.
Don't do that.
No.
Don't do that.
No. From playing Battlefield Gothic for many years, don't directly stick to the ships because they'll snap and then you're stuck.
We'll get stuck
then.
It's easy. You open up your phone, you go to the Facebook Messenger app, you send a message to TD Combat saying, "I'm missing my widgets."
Yeah. Okay. All right. Fine. I'll do it. Right. So that is the main piece of news, that I'm missing widgets. War stories. Okay, into war stories now. We've got a lot to recount for war stories, so we're going to have to do a bit of an abridged version. But as we said in the last episode, we were all getting ready for Fleet Muster 2 down in Cardiff at Firestorm Games. Very excited to go to a nice big tournament, meet lots of other Dropfleet players, and actually meet a few Dropfleet players again. So lots who are starting to become tournament regulars. But we've got, starting to see some of the same people turn up again at the tournaments, which is nice to see. I personally intend to go to every single UK Dropfleet tournament that happens.
Are you going to try and come in the top 3 in every single one? Or,
on track so far.
Yeah.
No, I think it'd be nice to go to all of them if we can. Anyway, slightly off topic. So Cardiff, we're just going to talk about our favourite game from that tournament. It was a standard 3-game tournament in one day, and the scenarios were mixed engagement in the first one, and the second game was grid control, and the third and final game was moonshot. They were all their vanilla versions, so there were no variants played. The approach type, everything was as its standard form. Everything else about the tournament was normal, really. 20-0 system. We think there might have been a slightly different version of the fixture matchups happening, because none of us felt like we played the people we expected to if it was first played second, third played fourth, fifth played sixth.
Yeah, it looks like in the last game, it looks like the top 3 players played the next 3 players down, rather than having the first place playing second place and then third place playing fourth.
Which we might argue that is actually a fairer way, rather than you have top. Go on, explain.
Well, yeah, it stops whoever's sort of fifth and playing someone who's sort of should be at the bottom but has managed to win a game and come up to sixth, and 20-0ing that person and coming really high and then everyone else above them draws because they're playing people of a similar sort of ability.
Yeah, so it keeps the better players up there a bit more easily.
Yeah, it did make it closer at the top as well, I felt, which was quite good.
So what you're saying is that under that system, someone that's third from bottom is probably pretty rubbish then, really. Anyway, moving on.
Let's not move on. Let's stay with JJ and let's have JJ talk about his favourite game. Now, you don't have to go through the pain of recounting all of your games, but if you could just pick one to wade through on and to tell which was the most fun. I mean, of the 3, one of them had to be the most fun.
Yeah, I mean, I had 3 pretty close games really to start with. They certainly, come turn 4 switched over pretty quickly. I tended to lose the kind of the space battle in most of them really, so I took pretty heavy casualties. So it was looking pretty good, and then suddenly, I've lost all ships.
Do you want to recount your list just quickly for the listeners so they can just know what sort of list you're talking about?
I've got to remember what I took.
Come on, don't let me down here.
So I had a Vanguard group with an Avalon with an AV4 Admiral. I had 2 line groups with San Francisco and 4 New Orleans. So I had 2 San Frans in total and 8 New Orleans total. So pretty heavy on drop. I had a single group with a Rio. It's kind of my backfield marker. A group with 2 Seattles as my launch, and a group of 2 Madrids to provide some ground support. And lately have proved pretty good.
So it's a pretty heavily ground-facing list, isn't it? With 2 troop ships, 8 strike carriers, and bombardment cruisers. That's clearly, we know what you're aiming after. So I think we saw a clear pattern in your games, didn't we, of what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty unlucky with most of them. I don't want to blame dice because that's a really lame excuse. All 3 players I played were all good, including Chris Rogers, our own from Red Warsock, a long-time opponent who I've beat a few times, so I don't feel too bad about losing to him. My last game was against Morgan with his PHR, which was a good game as well. But my first game was probably the standout one for me because it ended up being a 10-10 draw. And I played Anthony Brown, who had a very similar UCM list to me. He didn't have the Seattles for launch, but he had a lot more burn-through lasers. So he had a Berlin, a pair of new Kairos with a Lima, and the Avalon. So it was quite similar, but more combat orientated, and he was definitely winning the space battle. It was only because I'd gone so ground heavy because he only had 6 New Orleans compared to my 8, and I killed his San Frans pretty quick. So it was only because I had the ground superiority that ended up being a draw. In space, he had pretty much decimated my fleet. Interesting.
I think he was the only UCM player who took a Lima. I think every other UCM player there
took Jakartas.
Of the 5, Limas are disappearing.
Jakartas are cheaper.
It's like watching the White Rhino disappear steadily over the years go by. It was when everyone first started playing with UCM, it was like, right, Limas burn through. This clearly matches up and works nicely, and then they've started to disappear. I think, as a UCM player, why do you think that is?
I like the Limas. I think they're good. They definitely work well in combo with burn throughs. I think if you're taking Avalon, it's very hard to resist taking a Lima. Because that burn through 8 with 4 dice is lethal pretty much. When you've got 2 dice, I find it a lot easier to completely fluffy roll. Whereas with 4 dice, you've got a much better chance of at least getting 1 hit and then being able to roll again. So for me, I really like Limas. The problem with them that holds me back from taking them is that for all they're worth, I find they're quite expensive, which is what's leading a lot of UCM players to go for Jakartas instead, because you can take a group of 1, they're nice and cheap, and they're not scanning, they can be protecting a ship. So they're dual role rather than just single role. The only downside to doing that instead of the lemur is that with the lemur you can do weapons free on one or course change, and you can do active scan on the lemur. Whereas with Jakarta, if the Jakarta active scans, the rest of the group can't do anything else.
So if Jakarta's with an Avalon, say, you could active scan with the Jakarta, but the Avalon's going to be restricted to standard orders, which most of the time would be fine.
Yeah.
But there are times that you would want to course correct to bring that laser into range, which has done to me a few times. Yeah, we'll get to that. So single standout moment of that game. If you think of one moment where you were like, that was nice. Or was it because all of your standout moments were just successfully dropping troops down? It's not dramatic. Yes, dropship down.
I think, if standout moments are probably it's not actually even my fleet that had the standout moment. It was really Anthony's group of Taipei's that managed to jump across the board, kill one ship, because the best part of my entire fleet shot them 2 turns in a row and managed to cripple all of them and not cause any significant damage enough to kill them.
I can't believe it took you that long.
So I killed one on the first shot. I crippled 2 of them on the second volley, but didn't finish them off with the cripple. And then they got through again. So they killed a San Fran, a Seattle, and a Rio.
That's ridiculous.
Like 4 Taipei's.
Such a high kill count for what?
I love
4 Taipei's?
I love 4 Taipei's. They're amazing. I didn't take any. I wish I had. So I know it's not my fleet's best moment, but it was very impressive. It was a good highlight of a showcase of what Taipei's can do.
I think you've picked Anthony's highlight. That's his highlight.
Yeah,
That's definitely his highlight.
Totally his highlight. Yeah, I had my head in the hands and wanted to cry, to be honest. He'd gone through half my combat capability of my fleet in like 2 turns with 3 frigates. It's like, what? Okay. But yeah, Avalon killed some stuff, but there wasn't really any sort of jump out moments for me in that game, from my fleet side anyway.
Well, favourite game of the 3? So just want to give a shout out to your opponents first.
So all of my games were enjoyable, so it's quite hard to pick which one was my favourite. But my 3 opponents were John, who was the stand-in TO after the original TO managed to knock himself out falling on some ice. So also a thank you to him for jumping in.
I hope you're okay, Callum.
Yeah. Hope you feel better.
That was a very enjoyable game. He was playing Scourge. I managed to just eke out a win. My second game was against Anthony Brown, who had just beaten JJ. Well, no, drawn against JJ.
Drawn. Thank you very much.
That was also an enjoyable game as well. He's a good opponent and a nice guy. It was a victory again to me, and I have to apologise to him because I also played him at Maelstrom and also beat him then.
I forgot about that. Yeah, so you played in 2 tournaments in a row.
He brought a guns list in Maelstrom and I brought a cruiser list in Maelstrom, which was a bad matchup for him. And then he brought a beam list to this one, and I brought a frigate heavy list, so it was also a bad matchup. So that was a bit, I felt a bit mean. And then my third game was against Chris, which was also JJ played, and me and Chris have played lots together. And
both Red Warsock and
back and forth going on.
You're kind of running opponents, really. You've got a bit of a grudge match going on, really, haven't you?
Yeah, we have. I think my last game was the most enjoyable against Chris because we're old opponents. We played a lot. There's a bit of banter going backwards and forwards.
Somewhat cinematic for you two to play in the final game of the tournament as well.
Yeah, it was. Even if he robbed me of second place, like his diamond not dying.
Go diamond! Woo!
So it was a lot of fun. That was a big victory to me. My list, I should probably go through, and also explains why my last game was the best, was I took a Scipio, it was a Priam, because it's a new battlecruiser, with a level 4 Admiral. There was an Icarus and 2 Andromeda in a battle group together. Icarus was supposed to stay on his own at the back, and the Andromeda go up with Scipio. 6 Echo, which I just put in my list because I haven't really used very many Corvettes. I was like, I'll take 6 because then they can still fight in orbit as well as do stuff on the ground. 5 Europas because 5 Europas is awesome.
A well-established tactic with you. Yes.
Yeah. Even if they don't kill anything, your opponent has got to deal with them, which generally means their fleet is where you want them to be. which is
turning
nice.
and pinned and in confusion.
And then Orpheus, Two Medea, and Ganymede and Two Medea. I like to have the balance of an Orpheus and a Ganymede in my list because then, depending on what I want to do, I can send different troop ships to different.
It's good to hear that argument for the Ganymede because I think it gets sidelined a lot in favour of two Orpheus.
It's very good if you're deciding you're going to contest a sector late, because then the victory point difference is the same, even if you knock clusters down by destroying sectors accidentally when you're bombarding, which I have done.
So standout moments of the game with Chris?
Standout moment was probably on the first turn when Chris brought all of his gates on and then pre-measured the range that my 6, because he had a gate in a big sort of group of 9, so that meant they were out activated by my corvettes,
and Europas.
And my Europas. So he did a bit of pre-measuring to figure out where he could put his gates, and then realised that they just sit in the corner unless he wanted to lose quite a lot on probably turn 1. So that was probably the biggest highlight. There was a bit of banter because of that. And also probably in a single turn with the Europas and the Echoes, taking a diamond from full health to 2 hull points and on fire.
Just with Europas and Echoes?
Just with the Europas and Echoes.
Wow. That was diamond shields up?
Diamond shields up. Oh, I might have fired out with the Orpheus as well.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it turns out Echoes are very, very good against Shaltari when they got their shields up, because they don't get the point defense rolls anymore.
Yeah, and we should point out that you were even fighting with your Echoes at a disadvantage, right? Because you did the attacks.
I mean,
in a different game?
In the first game,
I
accidentally misread their close action order attacks because I don't use them very often.
Right.
It's also going back, why my third game was the best was because I hadn't play tested this fleet. I literally just threw the list together at the last minute and went, oh, that'll do.
So you got better and better with it.
I got better. I learned the little intricacies you kind of learn when you're playing a list. I think that's me. Should probably mention that I came third and I was pipped to the second place by Matt.
By me! Yes, so I had a lot of umming and ahhing with what list I was even going to take, because I'm sure lots of people have seen I put up the nice picture of my fleet ready to depart for Cardiff. Basilisk, followed closely by 3 Hydras. Caused quite a bit of debate. And then also you guys being like, don't be a horrible person, don't bring 3 Hydras.
Yeah.
So
we weren't going to talk to you anymore if you did that to us. Well, we definitely weren't going to play you.
So after a time of sort of soul searching and agonising decision making, I ended up rewriting my list about 5 or 6 times in the day before, and ended up bringing something very close to my standard tournament lists, to be honest. All I really did was drop out the 2 Wyverns that I normally take, because I have Jin for close action, so that's probably enough. And I felt like sometimes in my other list, my opponent could do whatever they wanted with spikes, because the only thing that could hit them was a Basilisk. Everything else in the list was close action or launch. So in the end, I ended up taking a Basilisk on its own, a Sphinx, and 3 Skiller were my test unit, test battle group. I wanted to take the Skiller and see how they did. And the Sphinx is pretty much the only Scourge cruiser that can do well on its own and put out a hitty amount of firepower, because the Ifrit and the Wyvern both can't do that. The Wyvern really needs to be in a pair to work.
The Wyvern's very fragile on its own as well. Yeah, sort of, they'll do their thing and then it's gone.
I don't trust 2d6+4 close action on its own. Had a Chimera and 4 Gargoyles, a Hydra and 4 Gargoyles, for a total of 1 troop ship and 8 strike carriers of launch. 4 Nickar to make sure that you can kill a strike carrier return.
Yeah, I feel like
most of the time.
4's a good number
for 4 Nickar. And then my classic unit of 4 Jin, which is a time-honoured Scourge tradition to bring 4 Jin. So games, I played in my first game, played against Adam Cox's Shaltari. Lovely painting. I think some of you will have seen also his pictures of the blue and pink and the worshipping of the dots.
They're really nice. I like them. I'm very jealous.
Yeah, brilliant paint scheme. That was a good game. He played really well. Never easy to play Shaltari. And so that was a fun game. Then played one of our Red Warsock own, Adam Duckett, and his UCM. That one ended up going quite heavily in my favour, so apologies, Adam. I genuinely feel... sorry about that. And then And then I'm going to focus on my final game, because playing George McStocker's UCM, it was a brilliant game. He was a really fun opponent. A highly tactical game. It's one of those games where you're pitting wits, and that
I've never had one of those.
you got to have some wits first to pit against.
That's kind of my point.
Yeah, brilliant game. A very optimized UCM list. I think is very, very nice. 2 Avalons. Not often you play double Avalon. Heavy on the strike carriers, 210. No San Fran weakness, as it's sometimes observed in UCM. And as well as 2 Seattles to provide launch cover. Yeah, Corvettes in there as well. And much to my chagrin, I didn't have the lowest SR rating because he had 3 Taipei in a group. And I'm so used to always having my Jin and Nickar pretty much having free reign to always go first if I need them to. And they couldn't, so I had this 3 Taipei group. So I like to do last turn, first turn activation, double hit. And I had it done to myself.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you say you've had it done to yourself.
Okay, it was set up to be done to me. George was very unlucky, and I managed to draw Engineered Anarchy as one of my favourite Scourge cards. So he'd obviously put his Taipeis to activate first on turn 2. They were in a great position to attack my strike carriers, or even hit my Skiller before they got safe into atmosphere. And Engineered Anarchy let me dive my Skillers down first, shoot up. I actually attacked the strike carriers rather than the Taipeis, but the Taipeis were a bit stranded there. That was in Moonshot. It was a really good game, and it did go in my favour eventually to 15-5, but that was mainly because I focused heavily on the ground game, sacrificed a lot of my fleet, basically lost the orbital game. The Avalons did the things that Avalons do.
Yeah. Kill.
Not often either, George. Congratulations that my Basilisk goes down without firing a shot. That rarely happens, so grudging well done's there.
UCM high fives.
And it did crash and burn without managing to fire anything. I was trying to be wary with it behind the moon. And my Jin had fun hiding in atmosphere for ages and ages and ages, and then finally coming up at the end of turn 4 to destroy a Seattle. So yes, hats off. George beat me in the orbital game, but I played the victory points hard and made the most of max thrusting gargoyles around to steal critical locations at the end. Highly tactical, highly enjoyable game against a beautifully painted fleet as well. So well done. And obviously really happy to get second. Charlie Hamilton, I'm coming for you. Okay, moving on to Fleet Academy, and interesting one to discuss this week. We are going to use the wonderful DF list. Now, DF list has an interesting little tab which shows the take rates under statistics. So for everyone who uses DF list, and I assume that's most people, but we've probably got possibly some people out there who don't use it. It's the main list builder for Dropfleet. I wish I knew the name of the person who'd made it so I could thank them. But whoever you are, thank you for making it. It's been a really, really helpful to everyone who plays Dropfleet.
Yeah.
And in those take rates, we are going to look at not the highest taken ship, but we're going to look at the lowest taken ship. So the ship that appears in the least fleets created on DF list. And in each class, talk about briefly why we think those ships are the least taken. Now, I've literally just talked about one of these ships, starting with the frigates, and a ship that I took to Fleet Muster as a tester. And it's the Skiller, or Scylla, but I'm going to go with Skiller, because Greek has hard consonant sounds, and it comes from that. Skiller is a Greek sea monster. And it's the lowest one. Now, I took 3. I thought they were effective, but not like game-changing. They were a constant annoyance to an opponent. I really like them. I look at that stat, being able to drop into atmosphere is their main ability, fire up with 2 shots, hitting on 3s. They take signature into account since the errata of range is back. So why are people not taking them? Will?
Because the Jin is a lot better and only 1 point more.
Yes, Skiller are 42 points, Jin are 43 points.
Obviously, they share the same slot in your list. So I imagine most Scourge players will go, I'll pay that 1 extra point and take a Jin.
Therefore, how would you fix them, Will?
I would make the Djinn 45 points.
And then that in
That's
theory
just-
should make the skill
Just enough points, because the Djinn is very, very good for its points cost. I know a lot of Scourge players will claim it's expensive, but I rarely see them not just kill two or
So
three
you
ships
wouldn't
in
make
a
the
game.
skiller cheaper?
I think it's probably about right.
I
don't think there's too much wrong with it, points-wise.
if it didn't have, because it's got 3 weapon systems, like it's got a normal Oculus Ray, which it can fire 1 attack dice, 3 to hit, front arc. It's got its own reverse grav cannons, which are front side, which is the ones it fires with escape velocity, and as well, it's got pretty decent close action when they gang up. You're probably going to take them as a 3 or 4, and then together they can pop up and do 6 or 8 3+ scalding close action attacks. Hey ho, that's definitely going to do some damage.
Yeah.
So when I just their shooting from atmosphere ability, I feel like they could be cheaper. But because they potentially have a multi-role aspect of late game popping up, and we should point out that escape velocity is that you can only fire at ships in a layer above you, which means you don't have to be in atmosphere to fire it. You could be in low orbit firing at a high orbit target.
Yeah.
Think about all those launch carriers that like to stay in high orbit.
Yeah, like my Seattle's, like they barely come down unless they have to shoot.
Yeah.
Or just to get critical locations, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, the skiller can jump up to do that too. I really like them, and I feel personally that they need to be taken more. Scourge players, get out there, take skiller, try them out. They did well enough for me in Fleet Muster to justify their points, but then when Will says like, oh, you could have taken 3 Djinn instead, and what would have been more effective?
3 Djinn every time.
3 Djinn.
Well, yeah, but I mean the Djinn are easier to kill off once they've hit because they'd be vulnerable in low orbit or high orbit. Whereas skiller, your opponent has to go down there and get them.
Yeah, they're more survivable frigates than your other options.
They're never a high target priority for the opponent. So I'm thinking about like potentially let's do a list where I pack in as many skiller as possible. So I've tried writing a list that has 8 skiller. So like. Just think as an opponent how that if I could sit those in atmosphere and every turn be like, right, here's my 16 3-up dice. Roll that.
Well, your troop ships aren't going to hang around there for long, are they? Really, your opponent's troop ships.
No. I just dump them all into atmosphere mid board and say, right, okay, you've got to come down and deal with it. You got to send your corvettes.
That would actually be really good in the space station game.
Yeah.
Because all those strike carriers have got to be in low orbit, and you're just going to be picking them all.
Could split fire, appropriate like 5-4 at each one.
Yeah.
I may test that in the future.
Well, now we've given everyone ideas on how to use them. Maybe we'll see them take them all.
Yeah. Moving on to the cruiser class. The lowest taken cruiser in the game is from Sheltari, and Sheltari players may well not be surprised to hear that it is the Granite. Now, the Granite is the particle beams cruiser, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, do you want to just explain its weapon set, JJ, seeing as you are a budding Sheltari player?
Yeah. I'll be the stand-in. It's got a pair of particle lancers. It's not terrible in of itself. Single shot, 3+ to hit, front narrow, but it's double damage. So each one that fires can potentially do 2 damage with no saves. So against Sheltari, it'd be quite good because they wouldn't get the shields. The downside is that they're not linked on a Granite, so you can only fire 1 unless you go weapons free. So you've got a cruiser. There's 100 points. Okay, not too bad.
So it's relatively cheap. That puts it in the same price bracket as
a Rio. A Rio is 105.
And an Ajax.
Yeah, Ajax is 100 points.
100 points.
Or a Berlin, which is also 105. I'd rather take any of those 3 ships over the Granite, more for damage output. So it's a 100-point cruiser. You've got to go weapons free to get 4 damage.
And the times that you can go weapons free with a narrow front arc weapon is you can count on half a hand.
I can't think of a reason why you take a Granite over any of the other ships in the Sheltari list. Like, there's a reason it's at the bottom of that most taken list. As to kind of how to make it better, let us know.
Well, I think a first step is making the particle lancers linked.
Yeah.
Because then the weapon systems match its bigger brother, the Obsidian, which has the same 2 particle lances in the exact same place on the hull, is an identical weapon, and yet the Obsidian gets the luxury of linked for 2 of them out of 3 because it's got a third one above in the middle.
Problem is, I think that would make it a bit too good for 100 points then.
Okay, so put it up to
Yeah,
105,
you'd have to
110.
put the points up.
Yeah, but you've got to say, if it's level with a Berlin for points, and I think rolling 2 3-up dice to get 4 damage immediately, I think that's about the same damage output as the Berlin, isn't it?
Yeah,
surely?
but this has a scan of 12 and a thrust of 10.
So
And
it's-
shields.
Berlin has a scan of 6 and a thrust of 8.
Um,
So I think you'd be looking at, it would need to be more expensive than the Berlin if you made them linked.
Linked.
and 9-point defense as well, don't forget. So
Yeah.
it's kind of, it's one of the things that you can't, or you almost can't compare Sheltari ships to any other ship, because
Do you think
all
it would?
the defensive capabilities and
Thing
the
is,
extra scan range they
An
have.
Obsidian is 155 points. So you've got 55 points between the two. And what you're gaining for that is 2 hull and an extra particle lance.
The Granite's not really competing with the Obsidian in a Sheltari list typically.
Yeah.
It's typically competing with the slot taken up by the Ambers, because most Sheltari lists, I'm going to use Chris's as an example, goes something like Emerald, 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 loads of Void Gates, some glass, the battleship, either a diamond or a platinum, and then you've got enough points left over for about 2 cruisers. And right now, most Sheltari players are taking 2 Ambers.
Yeah,
'Cause
or
who's
they
gonna
can fit
say-
one in a basalt.
Oh, Basalt as well, yeah, you're right. So the Granite's competing with the Basalt and the Amber slot. So it needs to be at least close to equal to an Amber. And I think linked on the particle lances,
Making it 110 the same as the amber.
105
Yeah.
and linked.
Your
I
only
think,
problem becomes if Hawk follow through on their promise to release a 2+ armor save cruiser or
It becomes
battleship
more
or
powerful,
something.
doesn't it?
It
Yeah.
becomes very, very powerful against that particular ship, and it's probably worth even more points. Or even we see better passive saves as well.
So perhaps the release of 2-up armor will naturally push players towards particle
Yeah.
weapons anyway.
And then people, once they start using, people might see some tricks and tactics, like firing them through debris fields. Actually, firing a particle lance through a debris field isn't as bad as firing most other weapons, or firing from a different layer as well, because you're still critting on. If you're firing from a different layer, you're critting on a 4+.
The thing is that release of a
Which is
2+ armor save ship won't just affect that, it'll affect all of the Sheltari fleet. Because you've got so many particle weapons. I mean, if they release a 2+ armor save ship, the first thing that's happening is a load of people are going to start taking Jades with their one-shot particle lancers, because at the moment they're pants. Like, yeah, I would say Skillet are better, but yet they still get taken less.
Alright, I mean, the particle lance fulfills a similar role to a burn through, so why not give it flash as a bonus?
Yeah.
Like, give all particle weapons flash as well. I mean, I know Sheltari are not going to have that many issues hitting targets from a distance, but it's a little extra thing. If the Sheltari player controls some ground guns, that could be the difference between those ground guns being able to hit a target and not putting a spike on it.
I mean, for me, to make the Granite a competitive choice against the other cruisers in the list, making it the same price as the Amber and making them linked, that would make it, for me,
I'll be happy with
a
that.
viable choice between the two.
Yeah.
Because then it'd be the same case as you've got with the UCM, where you've got 105 points for a Berlin with a burn through, or 105 points for a Rio with the mass drivers. It'd be a similar sort of. I know, like you say, well, they're not directly comparable because of the different scans, different armor and shields and stuff, but it would fulfill a similar sort of choice. So the Sheltari player would need to choose between which way I wanted to go with it. Like, I would choose the Amber because same reason I choose a Rio over a Berlin. I roll badly. Rolling double 1 happens more often than not.
Yeah.
So it's the same with particle. I'd rather roll more dice. I'd always rather choose a weapon that has more dice.
I mean, let's put it to if Sheltari players want to leave us messages on the Facebook page. Let's put it then. So if the Granite was 110 points but had linked, would you take it over an Amber?
Yeah.
Yeah, let us know. Moving on to the battle cruiser, which is the least taken battle cruiser of them all. And staying with Sheltari, who I'm sure they can guess what it's going to be. It is the awkward, ugly duckling of the Sheltari ships, fulfilling some kind of role, which is hard to discern. It is the Palladium/Sapphire.
It's the battle cruiser with split personality disorder, I think, because
I want to be this, but I want to be this, but I want to do this.
it wants to bombard, it wants to close action everybody, and it wants to start shoving people around in the playground with its impel weapon.
I like that. Being the playground bully.
Yeah, it is a bit of a weird ship that's trying to fulfill a lot of roles and not doing any of them exceptionally well. That said, the beam close action weapon is pretty tasty, but if I was going to take that, I'd take the much cheaper jet.
I think if you're a Sheltari
Or
player who like takes a Palladium or a
turquoise.
Sapphire, you should start the game with like +5 victory points.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, a turquoise is a much more promising proposition. You know, it's got the same close action gun, but it's 115 points, whereas a Palladium is 185 points. For the same close action gun.
The Palladium it's got its Ion Aura as a close action weapon, so it's a beam weapon, D6 +3, 3's to hit, and yeah, okay, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
But you're never going to take 2 to stack that close action, whereas you could, and we have seen Charlie, shout out to you, taking 2 turquoise, because there's less points, you can fit them together, and you've got way more effective close action. Then they can also fire their other close action, which is that useless harpoon cascade of 3 4-up shots.
I don't even think they should bother giving Sheltari ships close action weapons unless they're dedicated.
So they should just not have it to save time.
It's just pointless. Like that rolling that dice is just pointless. It's a waste of time.
And then it's got its 2 weird. It can Ion Storm bombardment, which is pretty good bombardment, admittedly.
Yeah.
And they can bombard at 12 inches at scan range, which is quite a good distance.
Yeah.
Then we've also got gravity coils.
It's the gravity coils to me that makes it completely pointless. Just take them off.
Put
it all gravity coils.
That's too big a change, isn't it? So I don't think you can't do that. You can't remove a weapon.
I would rather have a particle lance or a disintegrator battery instead of.
So with our changes, realistically can't take away weapons.
No.
So if we're going to make a realistic improvement to make the Palladium a more appealing prospect for Sheltari players, what do you do?
Make the gravity coils impel 1.
So it would also help the fact that gravity coils aren't taken in other places too, in the light cruisers.
Because don't forget, it can fire all of its weapons, and it doesn't have to go weapons free because they're all close action. All the gravity coils. Just make the gravity coil better. I think the main problem it has is in larger games, it's fighting with a diamond, and the diamond is always going to win.
Yeah, who's going to take a Palladium over it?
Who's going to take a battlecruiser over a diamond?
If you make the impel better, then you give a clear other tactical choice.
Yeah.
Because you can spin a ship round and close action it in the butt.
Yeah, basically. Or go for someone's troop ship and make it fly away from where it wants to be, and then take a sector and bombard it at the same time then. So
just to recount what Impel does again. So at the moment, Impel 2 means that you have to cause 2 criticals, don't you? You have to get 2 critical damage to turn a ship 45 degrees.
No, I think you just have to do 2 damage.
Okay,
obviously,
just 2 damage.
Getting 2 crits is easy way of doing it, I believe.
So right now, that is really, really difficult to do with... you've got to roll 2 4-ups to turn a ship 45 degrees. And on standard orders, it's just going to turn back to where it wanted to be anyway, or course correct back. So if we changed it to Impel 1, then it could potentially
turn it 90 degrees.
Yeah, turn it up to 90, and it's way more likely to be able to turn it 45.
Yeah, so you're more likely to get that
much more appealing, and possibly a little points drop to sort of ease the bargain. Maybe 175.
Yeah, I mean it's probably that amount of points because it has a fairly high amount of hull for Sheltari. 13, 13 is quite high when you've got a fork that's passive save that you can turn on and off.
If it went down to 175, it'd only be 10 points more than the jet heavy cruiser. And 6?
Okay, so maybe 180, and Impel rule changes.
Yeah, 180. Make it Impel 1.
The other weapons are fine.
Yeah, I'm kind of I mean, the Iron Aura / Storm weapon is a nice weapon in of itself, but whenever I think, like, I look at an Adamant and a Ruby and think, oh, loads of dice, then I look at the Palladium and think a Sapphire and think, oh, okay, it's not too bad. But then I think, well, the best thing about that for me is the Iron Aura Iron Storm gun, which immediately means, okay, I'll take a turquoise. It's got the same weapon, but is 70 points cheaper.
It's more of a dedicated role, because if you're taking something for bombardment, you might as well take a turquoise.
Yeah.
And if you're taking it for Impel, then I suppose you might as well take light cruisers.
Yeah. I could think of the reason I would take this would be if I wanted to keep my Admiral alive and I for some reason didn't want to bring a diamond, so that I could clear the air and then he can come in and just bombard something when there's a thing where you can shoot at him.
Yeah.
So he's sort of keeping my ammo alive, but still doing something with my ammo. But Shaltari's got such a huge scan range that that's not really a problem for them anyway.
Yeah.
So
I think some good ideas there. I think it's a tricky one because they've made it so multi-role. Moving on to the battleships. Now, obviously, there's only 8 battleships to choose from, but the lowest and least... No, there's not. There's 9 battleships because UCM have 3. Forgot about that.
Which is convenient, seeing as one of them is the worst.
Yes, it is. It is the Tokyo. Tokyo is the least taken ship in battleships across the game.
the fact that UCM have 3 might also be one of the reasons why they're taken less, because there's 3 to pick from instead of
and the other
2 that everyone else has.
So just to point out that the Tokyo is the bombardment battleship. Now it's exceptionally good at doing that because it's got a total of 10 2-up dice it can throw at bombardment.
Yeah, it can pretty much kill 2 sectors of the turn if it can get in range.
Yeah. That's impressive in itself.
Yeah.
It's 4-up, 4 attack dice, mass drivers. Nothing really. You're rarely going to fire. You might fire. You're never going to fire them unless you're not doing bombardment.
Yeah.
So they're not that effective. It does have a standard Berlin style laser, which is okay. Got the standard UCM burn through laser, and then on top of that, it's also got swordfish missile base too. So it's got good close action. So it's got good close action. It's got a laser. It can bombard, and it's got spare mass driver turrets too. So what's the downside, gentlemen? Why is it not being taken?
It's too slow.
Its engines are too small.
Yes. Yeah. Its weapon profile is great, and the scenarios where you've got a cluster near you, I can't remember the name of it, but there's that one where there's the nearest clusters you're supposed to blow them up, and then the furthest away one you're supposed to capture for each player.
I'm starting to forget those other scenarios because we only ever play the tournament ones.
They're not played the tournament ones. So that scenario, it's perfect for. You can roll onto the board, you can devastate the 2 clusters near you, and then kill anything that arrives in front of you. Every other scenario, i.e. the ones in the tournament pack, it's practically useless because it's a nice ship. If you want to keep your admiral alive and keep him at the back of the board, great, no problem. Getting it into range of clusters that you actually want to blow up is pretty difficult.
Especially if we think about the 3 scenarios that are cropping up again and again in tournaments, because they're the easiest ones for TOs to put on, and they're also probably the most balanced between space and ground. Your Tokyo is potentially going to have to fight in mixed engagement, grid control, and moonshot. Yeah. Now, in moonshot and mixed engagement, your Tokyo is only going to have 2 clusters as a target. So your opponent's going to know straight away if you're going to go over and bombard it, because they're both on the mixed engagement. The clusters are on the midline, and in moonshot they are again 20.
You can do it.
Yeah, 20 inches away.
You're going to go to one or the other, and it's going to be very obvious which one you're
going to. So
yeah,
like all aboard the slow train to the cluster. Boop, boop.
I did look at this, and with moonshot, I think it is probably part. There's usually a debris field between your deployment zone and the cluster on either side.
Yeah.
So it is possible to max stress the Tokyo from the deployment area behind that debris field at the beginning of the. Well, it won't
turn
be
1. Battle line.
Yeah, turn 1.
Beyond turn 1.
And then silent run it onto the cluster, and then shoot the cluster. When I measured the ranges, it was possible to do that, but you'd be shooting turn 3 and you'd be dedicated to that cluster. If your ground troops going to the other one get intercepted or killed, because it's going to be obvious the second you put the Tokyo down where it's going.
What's going to
happen? The whole fleet's going to go to the side.
Well, they'll just send one strike carrier the other way, so you have to go over there and bomb it.
And it's the same with is it grid control with the stations down the middle.
Mixed engagement has the stations in the middle. Again, your opponent's going to know, and you also have the added downside that is distant approach type, which means your Tokyo is not even going to come on until turn 3.
Yeah.
And then the party will already be over. Yeah.
I think for friendly games, Tokyo is fun, but tournament play at the moment with the scenarios that are being used in the tournament pack, it just doesn't really work unless it was faster.
It'd be best in grid control, because there's 5 clusters to pick from to bomb. Less obvious where you're sending it. That's the only place.
But again, they're all kind of staggered down the middle line. So he's that 7-inch move or whatever it is.
Yeah. And you're never going to want to bomb your own cluster.
6-inch move. So you've got to go 24 to get there. You've got to be within 6 inches to shoot it. So that's 18 inches.
8 inches. It's got an 8-inch scan.
And if you're not going to bombard, you've got a glorified Berlin.
So you've got to be within 8 inches, that's 16 inches, you can go 6 inches a turn, so that's 2.5 turns of movement.
Well,
so it's going to be turn 3 before you can shoot anything.
Well, if you max thrust, then you could go 12, and then so you've got 26-inch range over 2 turns, but you'll be lit up.
You'll be lit up
which
like
sometimes is a
tree.
good thing, because sometimes you want a
If you're
big
playing
bad battleship to be
Shaltari,
shot at,
Yeah.
rather than your Madrids or San
Anybody
Frans or
with a
something.
diamond is just going to delete it off
That's
the
true,
board
'cause
in
it's
one
going to be
shot.
it's going to be in low orbit. Orbital decay is the enemy of battleships.
Diamond's
as
going to
I
laugh
know.
at it.
For not many more points, you could take an Avalon and a Madrid
I'd rather do.
for 250, 260 points.
I'm loving Madrids at the moment, to be honest.
Yeah.
79 points.
What would we change then, Madrid? We were talking about battleships, maybe
Tokyo.
across the board for UCM being faster. Make them thrust 8.
Don't think you can make them faster across the board. It would fix the Tokyo if it made it faster. Potentially, maybe give it some like enhanced ECM suite or something, so that it's got a longer scan or something. So it's bombardment, or like make some rule where bombardment guns have a slightly longer range. But
Just
that would make Madrid's even better.
It'd have to be across the board, and that would make too many other ships too good.
So like I think making all the battleships faster wouldn't be good. It would unbalance them and make them too good for their price.
Yep.
And you can't just make the Tokyo faster. I think making the scan of all the battleships bigger, potentially, but their scans are already 8. If you make it 2 inches further, it'll be 10. What's the scan of a PHR battleship?
10 at the moment.
So it would equal PHR, and they're supposed to have a bigger scan. So it wouldn't be fluff.
Could you just make them even cheaper? I know they're cheap anyway. Could you drop them to like the same as an Atlantis, like 205?
I don't think I'd take it still.
Wouldn't take it.
I think the problem is the battleships are designed for 1,500 point fleets, which is, so you could take 2 Tokyos at that point. You probably would take 2 Tokyos then, because you could just delete a cluster. You're like, oh, my opponent's taking that cluster, it's gone.
If I was playing that big a game, I'd probably take a Tokyo. If I was going to take a Tokyo, I'd take it and a battle cruiser.
Yeah,
like an Avalon to do the damage. And I mean, what we are kind of skimming over is the fact it does have a burn-through laser on it, so ultimately...
I mean, it's got some decent weapons. They're not, compared to other battleships, they're not as good, but they're still...
Yeah, the close action and the burn-through is still good. It's just, its strength is supposed to be bombardment, and due to its lack of speed and scan, it's really hard to apply that to any targets.
Yeah, you kind of have to build your list around it. And that means you're probably going to lose some scenarios like Space Station Assault.
What if you made it like
scan clusters and light them up with signatures? That would be funny.
Overcharged lasers? No, that's a card, isn't it? What's the siphon power?
Like the St. Petersburg has.
Yeah, a bit like it. What if it was something like you can't fire any other weapons, but you could fire the heavy laser at a cap of 8. So while you're on approach, you can do more damage. You treat it like a St. Petersburg. Heavy thinking going on. Gears are wearing. Would that be enough? Have I made a good offer?
Would you take it?
No.
No, and I'd then feel like if you did that to the Tokyo, you'd have to look at doing it to the Beijing as well, because they've in theory got the same laser.
Oh, yeah, they do. Damn.
So,
you have to do it
and that would make the Beijing amazing. Like, if you did that, I'd take it in every game. A burn through 8 on the Beijing, going weapons 3 with that would just wipe out anything in front of it.
I'd take that, because it's not often that you're going to be able to do weapons 3 with a battleship and have a target. So
It's really fun when you do that.
I'd accept that. I would say changing both battleship burn throughs to cap 8.
I don't know, Will, what do you think from a PHR perspective? What could you do to fix a Tokyo?
I don't really know.
That's not good enough for this podcast.
You're fired.
You could possibly give it some kind of special rule wherein
it can bombard further away.
in distant it comes on turn 2 instead of turn 3. That might be quite a nice rule. So that then it's got a better chance of actually getting that bombard down on turn 4 or before your scoring turn.
I mean, like a hypothetical thing that I was thinking about in the back of my head as we kind of talked was like moving it from battleship class to like light battleship class. You wouldn't, you could rename it to something else, but bringing the points down and making it have maybe slightly less hull and slightly better scan or something. So like somewhere between a battle cruiser and a battleship, basically.
Yeah.
So slightly more hull, but slightly.
That might be a good idea. Yeah, just make it faster.
Then that would explain why it would be faster, and it would have, so it'd be slightly faster. You could potentially give it, oh no, I think I'd keep the scan the same, but just make it a little bit faster. Bring the points down a bit and reduce the point defense and arm save or something.
I think that's the best idea so far. My last radical idea to chip in there is to make it a troop ship as well. What if it could drop two bolt landers?
That'd be too good. It'd be amazing.
Are you sure? Because you're likely to be over a sector that you bombed as well.
You could give it a drop ship, so it could
One
have
drop
like
ship,
an orbital, like Halo ODST drop.
Yeah,
So you
well,
could just let
you're
that
not like
fluff it.
they don't land; they're fired at the planet.
Yeah. So
like,
that'd be quite an interesting way of doing it.
Tokyo arrives, blow away the enemy, drop one lot of 3 infantry down.
Or just drop a tank or a man.
Yeah, tank or a man.
Oh, you think just make it like a strike carrier?
Yeah, just
Okay.
make it a strike carrier.
Not a bolt lander.
But they could be fired from low orbit.
Yeah.
So it'd be like it's literally launched at the planet,
I like that.
like a drop pod, rather than an actual drop ship that lands.
That's my secret hope for destroyers, is rather than making them
Drop
strike
pods.
carriers, give them drop pods.
It'd be
Yeah,
kind
I
of like a
can-
Space
I can-
Marine battle barge from 40k or something.
I can relive Halo 2 then.
Right, on that note, let us have a brief moment of silence for our least taken ships. White Sphere Wisdom. Okay, a brief White Sphere Wisdom this time. We're going to address a question from a dedicated and loyal listener who has posted on our Facebook page. And they have asked what could be tweaked in the tournament scenarios so that they are less favourable to bringing loads of strike carriers. So the current tournament scenarios and rules, first of all, do we think that they favour strike carriers too much? And if they do, what could be tweaked rather than completely overhauled? What do we think? Well,
Personally, I don't think they favour strike carriers too much. I haven't seen it. It might be that I could take a particular list that means if my opponent takes too many strike carriers, I kill most of them before they hit atmosphere. But I haven't seen mass strike carriers be a problem.
just because we haven't seen it though doesn't mean it isn't
It is
potentially a
true,
problem.
just because we haven't seen it. But yeah, we've been to enough tournaments that we should have seen someone successfully using mass strike carriers. We just haven't.
Yeah, I mean, out of the scenarios that we played at Fleet Muster, it was only really grid control with the 5 clusters that potentially had a bit of an advantage if you had a lot of strike carriers. But the Moonshot with the 2 stations and mixed engagement with the 3 stations, I think both of those are pretty even on troop ships or strike carriers, and I think if you go troop ship heavy or strike carrier heavy, you're going to struggle in space. Both of them offer good opportunities to get shot up, basically.
I think it hasn't caused a problem yet because no one's brought a ridiculous amount. George brought 10 strike carriers, and that was the most strike carriers. I don't think that's not what we're talking about with too many. I think when you don't take a troop ship, I think that's fine. It's perfectly justifiable to take 10. I think what people are worried about is how effective at winning the tournament scenarios 15 New Orleans would be.
15 to 20, I think, would be strike carrier spam, but that'd be a lot of points in the strike carriers. You'd struggle with the critical locations.
And this is where we talk about the tournament scenarios, because in most of the scenarios, the weight is heavily towards the ground for victory points rather than towards critical locations. Because if we look at the scenarios, say mixed engagement, so that is 5 critical locations worth 2 points each, and then only 8 on the ground each turn. So actually, that's the only scenario I think where CLs are worth more.
Yes. Station assault, kind of, because the stations are not in atmosphere.
But the stations, only 2 of them are critical locations.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, this is the thing.
But the disadvantage of stations, if you bring lots of strike carriers and not really a combat fleet, your opponent's going to start building space stations.
And bringing skiller with them.
Yeah.
Take and hold, that's way weighted towards ground.
Yeah.
Grid control, that's heavily weighted towards ground. Then Moonshot is almost equal. No, still more
No, 'cause
towards
you've got
ground and stations. Yeah.
Stations.
8 on ground, 4 in space. No, 8 for the 2 clusters and then 3 for the 2 stations.
Yeah, so it's
plus the 2
14,
criticals.
14 per turn scoring for ground.
And then the 8 for
8 critical locations. So
Yeah.
again, that's more heavily weighted. And Station Assault only has the B stations as critical locations, I believe. Yep, B stations are medium clusters and critical locations. A space station scores medium clusters. Yep, so I think I would like to change critical locations to be 3 victory points. I think that would help, and that's a simple change. And I would also tweak the scenarios so that every cluster is a critical location. I think that would actually only affect Station Assault.
Station Assault's the only one that would
Because in
affect.
the others they're all
Only
already.
one.
But that would,
Uh,
in my opinion, that would even up the points. And without directly nerfing any strike carriers, you pull the weight back towards orbital combat. So I personally want to try that at Maelstrom 2, with our own version of an errata to the game. But if you're thinking of coming to Maelstrom 2, then we'll let you know well in advance that will be the rules, so you can start practicing it. Anything? So you guys are more of the opinion that we don't need to change anything.
I'd just be wary of knee-jerk reactions to people posting lists on the internet and saying this will be everything without us actually having played them.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
the seeming being that the lists that are doing really well at what I've seen at tournaments are the people taking the smallest amount of drops that they can get away with and still successfully win the game. And
I mean, kill points help a
Yeah.
bit towards that because, in the first Hawk event at UK Games Expo, one of the guys averaged 1,000 kill points a game, which
Yeah.
is obviously a bit extreme, but that's good going. He would have obviously got a lot of points for kill points, plus his critical location points, which I don't know where he finished, I can't remember, but that would have helped his victory points for sure, and thus his tournament points.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't think strike carriers in general are overpowered, or void gates, however you want to do it. I don't think they need nerfing. My only hesitation, I think the 3 points for a critical location is a good idea.
Yeah.
And I think when we have played it ourselves, it seems like a fairer fight. Space, it means it makes it an even fight between space or ground. My hesitation is that it kind of a little bit takes a bit of the identity of the game away a little bit, erodes it a little bit, just because, with the other space games, Firestorm, Armada, Battlefleet, Gothic, there's a whole plethora of different games out there. They're all about space combat. Kind of the part of the identity of this game is that it's all about ground assault, and I think by moving the emphasis back towards space, unfortunately, it has a dual thing of removing the identity a little bit, but also making it more fun, which is a little bit sad, I suppose, but the space combat is more fun than moving some tokens around on the ground.
Yeah.
It just is. I think it opens up a larger question, which we can't really cover now, about how could ground combat in general be improved and made more enjoyable.
Separate. Yeah.
I mean, if that happens, then maybe the carrier thing might be resolved as a byproduct.
Do we like the tournament scenarios themselves? Do you generally think they're balanced?
yeah,
I think Station Assault should be used more. I enjoy doing that.
I agree. I think the reason TOs don't do it is because you need so many darn
You need
stations
5 stations
do it.
aboard, yeah.
and no one likes to cut out that many station templates because you need 5 per table. So I honestly, in organising Maelstrom, I balked at the idea of doing Station Assault. I wanted to, would have done it, but couldn't organise it.
Yeah.
So yes, I like Station Assault. We just need more stations, or I've got to man up and just cut out loads of stations. You get bleeding fingers.
Yeah, I mean, we had a capacity of what, 28?
Yeah.
So 28, so that's 14 times 5.
Yeah.
So you need 70 space stations, or token stations.
Yeah, not realistic.
It's a bit crazy.
I think Taken Hold needs to be removed from the tournament roster because no one does it. And it's meant to be like the most normal scenario, but I think it's just never used and it's too ground heavy. So I would like to see something different in that slot. Possibly one involving like one station at least, or involving the power plants perhaps in some scenario. Like, because they're not used.
It'd be nice to see power plants. I think the scanner might be a bad idea.
Yeah, that's too OP.
Yeah, Shaltaria can have a field day if you stick scanners in there.
Yeah, I'm glad we don't have the scanning sector anymore in all our games, really.
I mean, this take and hold one, if you made these clusters the nearest ones, ones that you had to blow up, that would actually help with, it would get more people bringing bombardment ships probably, and the Tokyo would suddenly become a better prospect if I had to bomb that nearest cluster.
So stick power plants in them and say that they have there's a bombardment rule of some kind that generates victory points.
Yeah, so
I'd like that. That'd be a bit different, wouldn't
like
it?
a variant of take and hold to make it a bit more interesting. Because over that, I'd rather do grid control or mixed engagement over that scenario for variety.
Do you think people would get annoyed if that was a possible scenario, and then everyone brought bombardment in case, and then the TO didn't choose that scenario? Everyone would be like, "Oh, I've got this bombardment ship, it's useless now."
But if everyone brings it, it doesn't matter.
Well,
As long as it's
crippled.
fair, yeah.
It's like, actually, it's the same can be said for Station Assault, because in the first game of Invasion was Station Assault, and I bought Charybdis, and they spent like, oh yeah, I'm really excited to use my 4 Charybdis. There's all stations, I can't bombard them. So me and Anthony Bolt will both use Charybdis and just treated them like makeshift corvettes, buzzing around trying to shoot down strike carriers. So I mean, it was funny in that way, but not very efficient. But yeah, so I would like to see Taken Hold changed. 3 victory points for critical locations, possibly leave it alone. Maybe we were overreacting.
I think we need to play some test games where one of us just brings 15 strike carriers and sees if it makes a difference.
Yeah.
I mean, to bring 15 New Orleans would take 480 points. I worked out a minute ago, so 32 times 15. So if you're doing 1250, like
that's about what
nearly half. It's like 40% of your list, something like that.
Yeah, and then what would you take then? Two Avalons and a Seattle, and boom, off you go.
480 plus 132 plus 132 plus what's an Avalon? 2
guessing. It is 195. Cheap.
Yeah, they are pretty cheap. So that's 939. So you got 250 points left. So you could probably take 2 Seattles.
2 more Seattles.
4 Seattles, an Avalon, and 15 New Orleans. That would be pretty scary, to be honest.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
I mean, if you took 20, that would be 640. That would be 50% of your list.
Then take 2 Avalons and 2 Seattles.
Yeah, and that would be hideous.
No, 2 Avalons and 1
It'd be really
Seattle.
boring to play as well.
Yeah.
How would you arrange them though, so that someone didn't bring a small frigate group and just kill 3 or 4?
Well, they don't blow up in atmosphere, so
yeah, but get them before they hit atmosphere.
Doesn't matter.
You
With that many,
you can't kill 20.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I think you'd take 3 or 4 as collateral damage and be like, okay, I've got 16 down. I'm gonna win the ground now.
16 strike carriers.
Yeah.
That's gonna be depressing.
I was just on a last note. I was thinking perhaps some kind of rule where if you win the CL over a cluster that you don't control, you reduce the scoring of the CL temporarily. You reduce the scoring of the cluster, sorry. So if you've gone down heavy strike carriers but not got any assets above, like so you would normally score the 4 points, but I've won the critical location, I reduce your cluster score to only 3.
Yeah. Or you could.
It's a little extra complexity, I suppose, is the only downside. It's like another rule added into the mix.
You could just make it easier to nuke clusters. Stuff in atmosphere doesn't stop you from nuking a cluster.
Isn't it already a 2+ to do it anyway?
Yeah, but if the ship's within 12,
any ship,
even in atmosphere, you stop it from.
Yeah, I think it should only be medium tonnage ships or above that should be able to intercept, because I can't see.
That's what I thought the rule was.
A New Orleans strike carrier being able to shoot down a nuclear missile that's fired from a.
Well, they always must have a missile halo, haven't they?
I know, but stuff. It's like torpedoes. The torpedoes are armoured.
Anyway,
separate discussion.
Yeah. So that's our suggestions. Several meandering discussions there about what the solution is. But in general, I think
I'd like to see more scenarios in the tournament pack, to be honest.
More variety.
I'm not necessarily sure all the ones. I mean, the ones in there have been chosen for a reason. Some of the other ones in the rulebook that aren't in the tournament pack, it's pretty obvious why they're not. They're pretty crazy. I still get a bit worked up about these orbital guns and grid control, because they're pretty game changing if you get one of those and the military sector and fire at the same target. It's pretty much a dead ship.
I like that though. It means it pulls your ground assets over there, because you think if I don't commit to it and take it, I'm going to have an orbital laser firing at me. So it pulls focus away from the middle one with 4 military. Grid control looks scary, and then I like that the home clusters are both double too.
Yeah.
Anyway, we are running a bit long, so that's our 2 cents for suggestions for tournament scenarios. Okay, that just about wraps up the episode. We've been your hosts, Matt, Will,
And JJ.
and you've been listening to Scans Offline. Thank you for listening, and join us next time.